Hi, I'm Amy. I am an Air Force veteran with the Gulf War. We stood at the bottom of a tall, grassy hill and peered up at it, perplexed, incredulous, frightened. A big sword thumb of a house sprouting out of the ground like a toadstool. It was a 20-acre abandoned farm, and my dad just purchased it. He put his arm around my mom and said, "Alice, I think I can fix it up real nice." My mom stood stoic, silent. He brought his grandparents along. "Well, Pa, what do you think?" And Grandpa stood, collected his thoughts, stared up at the house. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a book of matches, handed it to my dad and said, "Well, this would be quicker." 4.5 miles due west stood our current house. 4.5 miles, but it might as well have been a world away. I was born in a small town called St. Joseph, Michigan, in a storybook house. It was a red brick Cape Cod with green and white striped awnings on an acre that was surrounded by towering pines. Out back was a barn where my sister kept her horses and we kept our rabbits. A realtor would have called this place a real charmer. I was the youngest of 4 children to 2 27-year-olds, an engineer and a newspaper correspondent. My sister Natalie was the firstborn. She was the precocious one, the rebel, the ringleader, the apex predator. My brother Chuck Jr. came next, then Earl, then me. 7 years between the oldest and the youngest. The house stood about a mile from Lake Michigan, and on summer nights, my dad would load us up into the station wagon and take us swimming. He used to pick me up and throw me like a football into the crashing waves, and I loved it. I have never been afraid of flying or swimming because of that. The neighborhood was full of kids. We banded together and we played from sunup to sundown, unsupervised, in the woods, the ravines, on the train tracks. Next door to us lived a family called the Eversols. They were an old money family. They had 6 boys, aged junior high to college. 6 boys, 6 afros, many muscle cars and motorcycles. They defied their pedigree every chance they got. Every one of them had a crush on my mom. My sister was smitten with Tim, the middle boy. He was 17 to her 13. The Eversols threw parties in the summer, big parties. These parties attracted girls, lots of girls. Girls who wore macrame halter tops and cut-off jeans and sandals that laced all the way up their calves. Somehow I knew that attracting girls meant power. Our last summer in that house, Natalie and Tim grew close. They rode her horses together every day. One night, he invited her to one of their parties. When my dad found out, he was furious. He marched to their house and dragged her out, kicking and screaming. And after that, she wasn't allowed to see Tim anymore. When I asked why, they said, "There are things that go on in that house." And they knew they had to get Natalie away from him. And that is how we wound up at the bottom of a hill staring up at an abandoned farmhouse. The farmhouse had either been gutted or never furnished in the first place. It had nothing in it. No cupboards, no counters, no working plumbing. Basement had a dirt floor, and it was home to a big, gnarly nest of blue racer snakes, which are this big, fat, long, aggressive snake. Out back there was an outhouse and a hand pump. My dad didn't want to put in a septic system and rallied to keep the outhouse. This was 1975. Luckily, my mom won that fight. The farmhouse was smaller than the story house, so my sister and I had to share a room. By then, she was 14 and I was 7. I was ecstatic. You see, I didn't just love my sister, I was in love with her. And I thought, this is finally it. We are going to be close. I'm going to be her little sidekick. We're going to hang out. Except she despised me. Mainly for being worn. So that never happened. Did I mention that the house was a dump? No, I mean, it was an actual dump. For decades, people had been dumping their garbage in the front yard. And when one side filled up, they started a new dump on the other side of the house. So it was actually 2 dumps for the price of 1. That first summer, Earl and I loved to play in the dumps. My mom told us not to go in there. My dad would say, "Let me know if you find anything valuable." We made forts and paths, and it was like having different neighborhoods of our own little town. One time, we found this upside-down car in there with busted-out windows. And we crawled in and we figured out if we hoist ourselves up, we can hang upside down. But we put the seatbelts on, hang upside down, and pretend we were drunk. But one day, that car gave out and went crashing down. And to get me out, they had to cut off my hair. Not long after that, my dad's buddy showed up with a bulldozer. And they raised those dumps to give us a proper front yard. And I remember looking up at the bulldozer and being so sad because that was our playground. I mean, now we were stuck out in the country with no friends and nowhere to play. But bit by bit, my mom and dad tried to make it a house for us. Tried to make it a home. My sister was lonely and ornery. She started bringing home stray animals that she would get from this widow who lived down the road named Mrs. Donkey. First she brought home a goat. We named him Billy, really original. Billy did not like it when we tried to leave. Whenever we got in the car, he would jump up on the roof and we'd be going down the driveway and we'd hear this, and the next thing we know, we'd see these hooves coming down on the windshield. One of us would have to get out of the car, grab a broom, and get him off the roof. And the goat really seemed to have it in for my dad. I guess he saw him as competition. And this one day my dad was out digging a hole or something, and I saw Billy up on the hill looking down into that hole. So I went out there, and there was my dad, knocked out. And Billy stood on that hill, looking down at him. And he was chewing his cud, like, thinking about it, like, I finally got you. And then my dad got up and hit him with a shovel. She brought home a raccoon. She named him Sweet Pea, and she bottle fed him. And my dad let her keep him in the bathroom until he could build a proper outdoor home for him. Sweet Pea tore up all the linoleum and ate the drywall that my dad had just put in. And my sister would sneak him into our bedroom at night. And she had this glow-in-the-dark Gene Simmons poster. You know, the one where he's going like that. And I was terrified of this thing. And it turned out Sweet Pea didn't like it either. He would hiss and screech at it. This one night, my sister had curlers in her hair because she was getting her picture taken the next day. And I woke up to her screaming, and Sweet Pea was on her head, just biting those curlers. His little hands were crossed out. So eventually my dad said, Sweet Pea needs to live out in the wild. So we let him go, and we saw him for years around the property. Sometimes with his own family. When my sister started high school in a new school district, the friction between her and my parents got worse. They didn't like her new friends. She would sneak out or stay out all night, or sometimes not come at home at all. And I would sit in our bedroom and worry what would happen when she got home. I worried what would happen if she didn't come home. Sometimes she was nice to me. That went like this. She would talk about her life and I would hang on every word. Every time her best friend stole her boyfriend and she went into a social exile, she stayed home. She'd put on the black light in our bedroom, put on her favorite album, Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, and she would tell me the lyrics. She'd cry. And I can still see her hanging out the window, the cherry tip of her cigarette lit up in the dark. And no, she was not allowed to smoke. Things quieted down in the house then. She spent time with her horses. I thought she was happier. We went to counseling for a while. That didn't take. One day, she showed me a Ziploc bag full of something that looked a lot like tobacco. Is that pot? I asked. Yeah, she said. I'm selling it for a guy I know, and I'm gonna get $300 for this baby, and I'm getting out of this dump. Oh, this worried me. She was 17, and I was 10. And the next day I got home, and my dad was holding that bag. Do you know about this? Yes. But I swear I thought I was helping. And I said, yes, but don't worry. She doesn't smoke it. She sells it. But she did smoke it. Although speed was her preferred drug. She went to live with my grandma. The day she came back, I threw myself at her and hugged her and cried. And that was the first time I ever felt tears of joy. Things were gonna get better. Things were gonna be okay now. But they weren't okay. The fighting got worse. My dad was just totally consumed with trying to control and protect her. And I was consumed by the constant conflict in the house. The last time she stayed out all night was the last straw. There was a woman who had been asking to buy our horses. And that morning, they called her up and said, come get them. My sister came home just then as they were being loaded up onto a trailer. And she never forgave them. She ran away, they'd bring her back. She ran away again. They were at an impasse. She wanted to live life on her own terms. It was the middle of her senior year, and she finished her coursework early. She had a full-time job as a bookkeeper at a local Honda dealership, and she wanted to move out. And they let her. They felt they had to. They told me later that they were worried my attachment to her would make me follow in her footsteps. She walked her graduation a few months later, and my parents threw a party for her. I hadn't seen her since she moved out. She looked older, subdued, distracted. Trouble always seemed to be nipping at her heels, usually in the form of older men who wanted to date her, but learned they couldn't control her. One day, she showed up at my junior high in her boyfriend's Corvette to take me out to lunch. Another time, she showed up at the house unexpected and took me to the beach. And one night, she picked me up to spend the night at her house. She had this apartment kind of like that Mary Tyler Moore place up in the attic. And we played records and we did our nails. The next day, she took me shopping. We had lunch at the Woolworth's lunch counter. And I thought, oh, this is it. This is my life now. I'm hanging out with my big sister. Maybe someday I'll even move in with her. And it was the happiest time of my childhood. But that didn't last. When she was 20, she suddenly got engaged to an army recruiter. He made her big promises. She wanted to start over in a new place. She wanted to go to college. They had a quick engagement, and the day after the wedding, she was off to El Paso. You see, she assumed he would give up drugs, and he assumed she'd be able to help him buy more drugs. They divorced a few years later. But she never gave up. She got married 3 or 4 more times. And she never moved back home. Now she lives on a little farm in New Mexico. A little animal rescue ranch that she supports herself. And one by one, all of his siblings left that farmhouse. In 2006, my parents sold it to a rich horse breeder. She had this idea of building massive stables and arenas. We just assumed she'd tear down that ugly house, but it's still standing. Certainly someone must have offered her a box of matches, but she didn't take them. The house must hold some people under a spell, and I think I'm one of those people.